Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the Anti TBR Tag video. So this one has been making its round on BookTube, as tags do, and I kid you not, these are some of the most entertaining videos to watch because as much as I enjoy hearing people gush about the books that they would recommend, it's also really entertaining to hear about the books that they have no interest in. It's just as telling about their book tastes, and some of the answers to these questions have been really fabulous, so I'm going to answer them myself and we'll see what happens, but why don't we dive right in? Okay, so question number 1. A popular book everyone loves that you have no interest in reading. I feel like the easier question to ask me would be the popular books that I'm actually interested in reading, because there aren't many of them. I probably could rattle off a list of popular books that I have no interest in reading that is as long as my arm, because personally I tend to read more backlist titles than I do like new releases, and those are the ones that are literally everywhere on BookTube and Bookstagram. They get a lot of hype, and hype gives me hives in most cases, so I tend to stay clear of them. But I also think that in general, because the books that are popular on BookTube and also on Bookstagram tend to be in genres that I don't read, so fantasy, sci-fi, and YA. Those are genres that I don't really touch, and I actually think that's a question that comes up later. But if I had to name a book or a couple popular books that I have no interest in reading, I would say Lore. I don't know who the author is. I can just picture the cover. It's very white. There's like a Medusa head on it. I don't know anything about the book, but that is not a book that I have any interest in reading. Another one, Ready Player One. Again, I don't know who the author is. I don't know much about the book. I do know it has something to do with some sort of video game, because I remember the movie trailer when that came out, and I know Ready Player 2, the sequel, came out I think last year. Neither of those books interest me. And then the other one, which I feel like is kind of a surprise one, is Where the Crawdads Sing, which I believe is written by Delia Owens. And this, on the surface, looks like a book that I would potentially be interested in, but there's some problematic elements of it that just mean that I've stayed clear of it. So I've heard things like the fact that there's kind of this magical Negro trope in the book, which is just not something I'm interested in, and that, when coupled with the fact that I think the only characters in the book that speak with a dialect in their dialogue are the black characters, there's just something about it that felt a little icky, so it's not one that I'm really interested in. Let's put it that way. Question 2. A classic book or author you don't have an interest in reading. So I was an English major in college, so I read a lot of classic literature. It came with the territory. I happen to enjoy a lot of classics, and yet one of the classics I have zero interest in reading is Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Now, one of my friends in college wrote her entire senior thesis on Moby Dick, and I spent the better part of a year listening to her finesse and fine-tune her argument, and that didn't make me want to read this book anymore. I was like, I'm good to have you be the expert on this book. More power to you. But really all I need to know about the book is that there's a whale, and there's a captain on a ship, and he's pursuing the whale, and that's it. I don't need to know more. I am good. The other classic that I really have no interest in reading is Animal Farm by George Orwell, and that is because I read 1984 last year, and I was bored. I did not have a good time with that book. I didn't like the storyline, the characters. I wasn't a fan of George Orwell's writing, so the fact that I have made it to 31 years without reading Animal Farm, somehow I got to skip over it in high school English, I'm happy about that. Like, we're also good on that front. It's just not a book that I have even the slightest interest or inclination in reading in the future. Question 3. An author whose books you have no interest in reading. Brandon Sanderson. Now, I follow some booktubers who love his books and talk about his books all the time, but I've never been even remotely curious about the books. He writes in genres that I am not particularly drawn to, sci-fi and fantasy, and I think for the most part he writes book series, not standalones. And again, I tend to read more standalones than I do a book series because of the genres that I prefer when it comes to like historical fiction, classics, nonfiction. But it's just a case of like, I would have to be really invested in something to read a book series. And there's a very slim chance that I would enjoy his books based on the subject matter. Also, in addition to being a book series or multiple book series, the books are just really long. So again, it just feels like it would end up being a waste of time for me, that I would not enjoy them, would likely DNF them pretty early on. So that is a no for me, dog. Okay, so question 3 actually has a second part, which is kind of a spicy one. It's a problematic author whose books you have no interest in reading. So I don't know if she's a problematic author per se, or that it's just a case of her debut book was problematic, and I think it was her debut book, but I'm talking about Janine Cummins, who wrote American Dirt. Now, this book was really hyped and had a lot of buzz and is fairly popular, I think, kind of around Bookstagram and just bookish people in general. I think it was also like an Oprah's book club pick at the time, but there was also a lot of drama around the release of this book, and some of it just felt really icky, and I just didn't want to be involved, and because of it, I've just not been interested in looking into the author's work. So the book is about an undocumented immigrant, and there was a book launch party. I think this was before COVID, I'm fairly certain about that, but like the centerpieces had barbed wire on them, which I was just like, really? Seriously? What? But there was also something, I think, about the fact that there was a book by an own voice author that was a similar story but didn't get anywhere near as much buzz as this book. So there were just a lot of layers and things, and it's hard for me to like differentiate because I haven't really looked into it since it happened all that time ago, but it really just put a bad taste in my mouth, and so I'm just not interested. And as far as like problematic author with a capital P, I would have to say H.P. Lovecraft. He writes horror, which is not a genre that I read, so I think I am safe, but I do know his books are considered classics in the genre, but I've heard that there is quite a bit of anti-Semitism and quite a bit of racism in his works, and I'm just not interested. So, there you go. So, moving along to question 4. An author you have read a couple of books from and have decided their books are not for you. So, I would say Marlon James, who wrote The Brief History of 7 Killings, among others, and I have attempted to read several of his books at this point, and I have ended up DNFing all of them. There's just something about his writing style that just feels really obtuse and just dense and not really entertaining to me. I think one of the more recent ones that I tried to read was The Book of Night Women, which I tried to read last summer, and I got like 1/3 through the book, but I just was not enjoying it at all. which is sad because Marlon James is actually a really nice individual. I have met him and he's lovely, but his books are just not for me. And I would have to say Marilynne Robinson, which is the same situation. I've tried to read several of her books, started them, ended up putting them down and DNFing them because they just were not my cup of tea. And then Christina Lauren, I've only tried one of their books, but I did not enjoy it. It was a romance with little, like, steam, and that really bugged me. So probably wouldn't read their books again. And if you are a subscriber to my channel, then you will know that V.E. Schwab is probably not for me either. I did read Addie LaRue, really did not enjoy that book, as I have said on this channel now a million times. I'm kind of a broken record, but my friend Liz, who recommended that I read the book, said that of all the V.E. Schwab books, this would be the one that I would enjoy out of all of them. And so, since I didn't enjoy that one, I'm gonna say no to all the others. So, I didn't give you one author, I gave you 4. Okay, so question 5. A genre you have no interest in, or a genre you tried to get into and couldn't. So I feel like I've already touched upon them throughout this video, but one of them is definitely horror. And that's because I'm a huge chicken, okay? Like, I don't do well with scary things. Like, Once Upon a Time, like, late 90s, early 2000s, I was into it. Like, I was one of those kids that watched The Ring, The Village, Signs, like, all of those scary movies. I was committed and interested, and then at some point in my life, it was like a switch flipped, and I was like, I'm good. I don't appreciate being scared. And I think part of that is because I really love sleep. And being scared means I don't sleep. And that it means that I'm just staring up at the ceiling, listening for like the axe murderer who's going to come out of the closet or from under the bed, or like the creepy monster-y thing that's just gonna appear out of nowhere and massacre my family. Like, it's just not a good feeling when you're someone like me who likes sleep and who also ends up being the only person awake in the house very late at night. It's just not a good look. Like, let me tell you. So that has come over to the horror genre when it comes to books. Like, I think it might actually be worse to read a horror book because my imagination can take it a level further than the movie might. And I'm just, no. So definitely not horror. The other one would be sci-fi, which I've read a few books that I would consider sci-fi, and I don't enjoy it. I think I'm okay if it's like sci-fi light, that I could potentially believe it a little bit, but like once you start going into space, no. I don't do well with space. I can do time travel to a degree, but anything that starts dealing with aliens and spaceships and things, I'm just no. And I know that's not all sci-fi, but it's a lot of sci-fi, and no. Fantasy kind of falls within the same realm. There are some fantasy light books that I enjoy, like Outlander I would consider up there. But again, I don't go for the fairies or the like other creatures and things. Like, it's just not my cup of tea. So yeah, that would be my answer. Question 6. A book you have bought but will never read. This can be a book you've unhauled / returned to the library unread. So, rule of thumb for me is I don't buy books that I don't think I will read. Like, all the books I own are books that I have intended to read, but I'm not perfect. So, of course, there are books that I've bought that I've unhauled, unread. And one of the books that comes to mind is one that I recently unhauled, which was All the Light We Cannot See. I feel like I still have a little bit of FOMO over having not read this. It is a World War II historical fiction. I know it's well loved. It won all of these awards and things, but I had this book for years, and when I say I had it for years, I had it sitting on my nightstand so that I would see it every day, trying to like shame myself into reading this book, because I figured if it was right in front of me and right under my nose, I would get to it sooner rather than later. And it sat there and it collected dust until I finally was just like, you know what? Probably not going to read this one. Maybe someday, but not in the near future, I can tell you that. And I think it's partly because there is a ton of World War II historical fiction out there. There are some World War II historical fictions that I absolutely adore, but there are also ones on my bookshelf that I am more interested in reading at this point than I am that one, which is why I unhauled it. And another book that I recently unhauled was The World That We Knew by Alice Hoffman, which I had that book for a number of years and just never got around to it. And when I was going through my like capsule wardrobe-esque audit of my books, that was one that I was just like, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna read it. I would be interested in reading an Alice Hoffman book, so maybe I just need to find a different one. But I'm also a little bit nervous because I know that her books, for the most part, have some sort of magical realism element to them, and recently I haven't done well with that. They've been books that I've just really not enjoyed, so I might need to do some research into her backlist and see if there's something that might be more up my alley, so we'll have to see about that. And question number 7, a series you have no interest in reading, or a series you started and have DNF'd. So 2 of them come to mind right off the bat. Shadow and Bone is the first one, and I think it comes to mind because like Netflix just released season 1 of their adaptation, I think like yesterday. And I hear about the Grishaverse and I see it everywhere, but I honestly have no idea what those books are about, and also have zero interest in finding out, which might get me canceled. I'm sorry. The other series would be A Court of Thorns and Roses. Again, not interested. I think for both of these, it just happens to be in genres that aren't particularly a draw for me. With A Court of Thorns and Roses, I think they're fairies, and I watched Noelle's like vlog of her reading the series, and the vlog was really entertaining, but I feel like that was enough for me. Like, watching Noelle and her gifs and memes and going on that journey with her was more than enough. I don't know that I need to read those books. So, those would be 2. Don't cancel me, please. And the last question, a new release you have no interest in reading, and again, I can think of 2. The Crown of Gilded Bones, I think is the name of it. I don't know the author's name, but I can visualize the cover. It's very maximalist. Like, there's a lot going on that cover. Again, don't know anything about that book, but I'm not particularly interested in finding out. I know that people are going crazy for this book, though. And the next one I feel like is a bit surprising, but it's The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna, and it is historical fiction, and it is set in the United States. And the reason for this is because I actually own a couple of Kristen Hanna's books. Where are they? Nightingale and Winter Garden. and I have not read them yet. Like, they are on my TBR, I want to get around to them, but they have been very low priority for me. In fact, they're 2 books that might end up in my next unhaul when I do like my, I guess, summer unhaul. But for me, it's a case of like, I should probably find out whether I like her writing and her books before I get a 3rd book of hers. Like, that seems like the logical decision to make. But also, I know that personally, when it comes to historical fiction, I'm much more drawn to historical fiction set in Europe than in the United States. I feel the same way about history. I am not particularly drawn to United States history. So the fact that The Four Winds is set in the US also kind of gives me pause. It's not my favorite setting. So yeah, that would be probably the most surprising one on this list of books that I've listed. And how many times can you say list in a sentence, Brittany? I don't know. But yeah, so that would be that. So yeah, those are the answers to those questions. I feel like there are a lot of books here that could potentially get me canceled, and all I want to say is don't cancel me. Like, I appreciate the fact that a lot of these books are very popular and that there are many people out there who love them, gave them 5 stars, count them among their favorite books of all time. Like, reading is just subjective, and so although these books aren't for me, they are for someone else, and vice versa. Like, there are books that I will love that other people won't, and that's just the way of the world. So please don't cancel me if I happen to not be interested in reading one of your favorite books. Okay? Okay. But now I guess I have to tag people, and I really didn't think about this. So I'm gonna tag Noelle over at Noelle 7 Pages and Katie over at Katie Reads and Rants, because I tag them whenever I do a tag. So guys, you should just know if you see a tag video on my channel, it's coming your way. Also, I'm going to tag Emma over at the Overstuffed Shelf, and also Becky at Bleedin' Reads, which is a fairly new channel, but I'm really enjoying watching her videos. So I'm going to tag those 4 booktubers. Looking forward to seeing your videos if you decide to do this one. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to give it thumbs up, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!